Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mayor Labriola?
Here.
Mr. Prickett?
Here.
Ms. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Moffett?
Here.
Dr. Parker?
Here.
Mr. Olson?
Here.
Mr. Wilson?
Oh, he just stepped out.
He's here but not.
Yeah. We have 3 sets of minutes under tab 1, 2, and 3. Our first set of minutes is of our February 22nd special call meeting. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
So move. Second?
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Our second is the meeting on March 28th, another special call meeting. Could I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And the third is our town council meeting a month ago, April the 5th. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion?
No.
None? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, Mayor. I'm sorry.
Okay, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Mayor's update. There are three things I wanted to cover today. At the April 5th meeting, we had a presentation by the ARB. Recall, we had asked them to come and talk about issues that have been brought forward relative to the Cape. They did long presentation, long discussion. At the conclusion, we asked that the residents, community members that were here, and then also other community members, to write their questions down and submit them. We created a format, a procedure process they followed. We have received a number of questions. They have been reviewed by our staff, by Stephanie and John. We have forwarded the questions to the ARB, and we are planning on a Friday. This Friday or next Friday? This Friday, to hear back from the ARB, and then we'll plan on that next week to make arrangements to how they will be distributed to everybody. So that process seemed to have worked so far in terms of getting the questions, and we'll get the answers prepared. Okay. The second subject, similar in a way, an issue had come up a while ago now, dealing with dwelling units, somewhat specifically related to a possible project, but more specifically the number of dwelling units themselves that is embedded in the development agreement. Yesterday we released an assessment, an audit, a final review that Stephanie and John and our staff have been working on for quite some period of time. We wanted to get that out to everybody so that they had a chance to see it, to read it. It's quite honestly, it's not reflective of all the hard work that went into just preparing it, a review of an awful lot of documents to make sure that the numbers, the accuracy were reflective of the discussions that took place in some cases many, many years ago. So that is out. And this afternoon, or later on this afternoon, John will be making a presentation to council on that. So if I encourage people to attend or watch. But I think if there are questions that they may have had from reviewing that document that was emailed yesterday, hopefully some of those questions could be answered by listening to the presentation today. But be that as it may, we will follow the same process, and we indicate that on the email or the e-blast that went out yesterday. If there are questions from the community, we will send them in to us, and we will respond in the same way as we did with the previous project on the Cape. Okay, so those were, you'll hear the presentation in a couple hours or so. And the third, I'm going to turn to Dan. A lot of discussion going on right now about roads and some of the activity that the county is taking, and wanted everybody to hear what we're planning to do over the next couple of days. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As many, probably all of you know, a year and a half ago, Charleston County came to all of us with 5 alternatives for improvements to what they call Segment C of the Main Road Corridor Project. Last Thursday, which was April 28th, the county announced 6 alternatives for improving Segment C. Interestingly, 3 of those are new alternatives, and 2 of them were alternatives that were dropped. So they basically changed the mix and represented. Importantly for all of you as residents and property owners and citizens, they're hosting 2 drop-in sessions to try to educate all of us on what the implications are of all those alternatives. The first one was held the first day they announced it, last May 28th or April 28th, and I know some of you were there because I saw some of you there. The second one, and this is important for all of you listening, is Thursday, May 12th, which is next Thursday, from 3 to 7 p.m. At the St. John's Parish Church, which is the church, if you go up Bohicket to Maybank and turn left like you're going to Wadmalaw, it's the first church on your left. It's a drop-in session. You can go and spend 15 minutes or 20 minutes. You can ask questions. You can learn about the alternatives. What you want to do is get educated on what the options are. Importantly, the town has decided that next Monday afternoon at 2 o'clock here, John Taylor and I will host a workshop where we can discuss all the options and try to answer questions about that and try to give you as much information as we can prior to the end of the period to discuss all this. Interestingly, Kiawah and Seabrook, as communities very interested in what's going on this thing, together with some of our neighbors from Johns Island, work together to develop what is now called Alternative 7, one of the new alternatives. What it simply does is propose improving Bohicket from Edenvale up to Brownswood, so going north, which is where most of the congestion occurs on Bohicket Road, leaving the oak trees and everything on the southern end alone. It also proposed improving plow ground from Bohicket over to River. And the reason for that suggestion on our part is, as you know, Maybank Highway is becoming terribly congested. Think about it over the next 10 years. You won't be able to get through Maybank Highway. So all of us are going to be trying to figure out how do we get over to where either 526 is or isn't, which is going to be on River Road, or if it's not there, we've got to get to the bridge to get into town on Highway 700, right? And we're all going to be going across plow ground, in our opinion. So even though some studies say it may not be too congested, the time to improve plow ground, in our opinion, is now, not a decade from now, because there's very little development on plow ground, and it wouldn't be difficult to expand that highway to a 4-lane parkway. Get it done now. And then you've got to improve our third piece from River up to where the intersection of the interstate is going to be and up to Maybank Highway. Improve that, because with all the congestion that's now there and the housing developments that are there, it's going to get worse. With that being said, the county has offered a period of only until, I think it's the end of this month, I may not have written it down. It's like the 27th of this month. They're willing to listen to our comments. You have to, as citizens, write to the county, and all you do is go to mainroadcorridor.com/segment-C. Don't write to segment C or it won't get there. Segment-C. And tell them what you think about these alternatives. There's a number of people supporting other alternatives that are going to be having everybody write in. If we don't write in, we're not going to be heard. This is a very short window for our voices to be heard. I invite you to join us next Monday afternoon, or go to the drop-in session on Thursday, but take an interest, because all of us know we are very dependent on these two little roads to get us back and forth to wherever we're going to go. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Dan. Okay, citizens' comments? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Andy Capelli, 160 Governor's Drive. I'd like to address one of your agenda items today, Ordinance 2022-03. Specifically, this was a draft discussed by the Planning Commission at its last meeting, made numerous comments, and all of which have been, except for one, which I'll come to later, have been adequately and accurately included in the draft that you see now. I'm going to talk about three other items with respect to the draft that you're looking at today that were not covered specifically at the Planning Commission meeting, which I think bear your attention. The first one is in 12-159, which appears on page 1 of 7, item C. And it's really the last sentence on applicability, discussing the town's annexation policy, plan and procedures manual. I have noted the significant effort that went into both the initial draft and the revisions that you have before you, and also with respect to the drafting of the entire annexation and plan development proposals. Both council and staff ought to be commended. It's fully comprehensive. What the so-called procedures manual represents is something that comes from a document called the Annexation Handbook, which was published by the Municipal Association of South Carolina to explain the annexation law in South Carolina. Well, that's the law we're following. That is not part of any ordinance in the state, not part of any ordinance anywhere that I know of in its entirety. I have the same issue with respect to this, since it seems like, having read the draft of the annexation manual, it looks like every substantive issue that is contained in the draft manual is included in the ordinance. So it's pure duplication. We were told at the Planning Commission meeting that this is purely informative. It's for information purposes. It is not something that should be included in an ordinance. The fact is, to include it would only be duplicative anyway. So I'm suggesting that you consider removing the last sentence in that paragraph. My second comment, and really the second and third, really deal with, in terms of the process, starting on page 3, section F, and it relates to section 4. I think if you follow section F in its entirety, the first section is planned application meeting. And if you look at section 4, it says after the pre-application meeting. But in between, you've got 2 or 3 other items, which include planning and commission and planning director, et cetera, that involve other people. The information coming from section 4 really should be, and I think if you consider the flow and the process, the information that is in section 4, coming from section 4, should be understood before 2 and 3. So all I'm suggesting here is simply a repositioning of section 4 with respect to the process and how it's conducted. Specifically, also with respect to section 4, I have written to, and again, this did not come up in, we spent a lot of time on section 4 at the planning commission meeting, but not with respect to the title. There is a lot of confusion in my mind, and I assume others, as to what a community workshop really is. As far as I know, it's not defined in any of the town ordinances. We talk about community workshop in the context of, we talk about workshops in the context of a workshop for the council, a workshop for the planning commission, but nothing with respect to the community workshop. The discussion around this issue resulted in some changes in other parts of the text where the word community was misunderstood or it was subject to misunderstanding and possibly excluded, depending on the interpretation, excluded a large portion of interested people on the island. So what was suggested, what I am suggesting here, is that we need to define what a community workshop is. Tell people what they're supposed to do, since the person conducting this is the developer or the applicant, not town, not the planning commission, not the council, but an applicant at the direction of the planning director is required to conduct this community workshop. Where he conducts it, how he conducts it, who sponsors it, all those questions. A definition of what this process is would really help not only understand it, but set the responsibility for a person who is basically not required to follow direction of an ordinance necessarily. Now, again, all of the points that would be covered are clear, and I think it's easy to see. So if we change the title, add a definition, I think it would be helpful to the process, in addition to moving the item itself up to flow efficiently through the process.
Andy, are you saying move 4 up to between 2 and 3?
Correct. It would become
Okay.
number 2.
Oh, between 1 and 2.
It would become, right, would become number 2 because it follows the pre-application meeting. And changing the title would be, and it's used in, if you look at 4-I4, it suggests a title that could be very easily substituted for this definition of community workshop. In our discussions, we did make some changes where the word community was in the text, and we weren't sure whether it was Retz Bluff, the settlement, any of the other so-called communities as they've been referred to on the island, which could include or exclude many other interested participants. So I would suggest we change the title of that from community workshop to workshop for all neighbors and parties in interest, which is the language in 4-Roman 4. So that would be my last comment with respect to that portion. One other comment, and this is the item that was omitted from the revisions, and I assume this, the draft of the procedures manual is intended to include all of the drafts or all of the comments. Throughout the manual, they refer to the town of Kiawah Island community, and that's where the discussion at the Planning Commission meeting centered. And it tends, again, to potentially eliminate a lot of interested parties. We solved it, or we recommended the change by simply referring to the town of Kiawah Island. It's the entire town. It's not just a community in the town, but the entire town should be of interest. So the comment was made, suggested change was made, that the word community be dropped. That just doesn't reflect in your draft. Every place else we changed it in the document and the draft ordinance was made, it just slipped through the crack, I guess, with respect to the manual. And it would be anywhere else in the manual where it occurs, we suggested that language be changed consistently. Thank you. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Randy.
Any other comments?
Thanks, Andy.
Citizen comments? Okay, we have two public hearings. The first is to consider approval of ordinance 2022-02, an ordinance to amend the Town of Kiawah Island Municipal Code, Chapter 12, Land Use Planning and Zoning Ordinance, Article 2, Zoning Division 2, Zoning Map District, Section 12-79, Designation of Annexed Territory. Could I have a motion to go into public, to have a public hearing, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are now in into public hearing.
Ask if anyone wants to speak in favor.
If anybody wants to,
John's gonna say something.
Did you guys want a briefing of it, or?
I'd briefly cover it if you would, John.
sure. Please.
So we do have two applications for a zoning text amendment. The first in your materials is AZO 22000001. This is for section 12-79, designation of annexed territory. The Planning Commission is recommending approval of this particular ordinance request, which was heard at the April 6th meeting. And the purpose and intent of this particular ordinance is to describe the town's policies and procedures for annexation and property located outside of the town's boundaries. If you recall, back in fall of 2021, we did receive an interest for a potential annexation application. And so that was the nexus of the town reviewing policies and procedures around annexation. And so from that, this section, along with our plan development section, was being requested to be amended. The town staff worked with the community to make these amendments, and sort of the birth of the proposed town's annexation policy and procedure manual as well. Two workshops were held, one on February 8th and February 22nd of this year, where members of the community participated and actively engaged in the review of this particular ordinance. And the key factors that sort of imply for this particular amendment is that it provides clarity to the authority of the annexation powers, as well as clearly affirms the annexation petition and zoning map amendment applications that can be submitted concurrently, and then establishes a base zoning designation for properties requesting annexation that do not declare specific zoning designation. And so together, those three things are kind of the bare meat of why this Planning Commission felt recommendation and approval for this. And I don't have anything else if you guys want to have any questions, but the text is there for you in your materials. Like I said, we've worked pretty long on this along with the community to try to get to some significant changes. And I feel that staff is comfortable with this moving forward.
Okay. Could I have a motion to move out of public
Yeah, because you still are in the public hearing.
hearing? Motion to come out. So moved. Second?
Second.
Okay. Could I have a motion to approve the first reading of section 12-79?
So moved. Second.
Second. Any discussion?
Good work, a lot of work.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. We thought it would be May. Made it. The second is to consider approval of ordinance 2022-03, an ordinance to amend the Town of Kiawah Island Municipal Code, Chapter 12, Land Use Planning and Zoning, Article 2, Zoning Division 5, General Procedure Requirements, Section 12-159. Could I have a motion to go into a public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Hearing, anybody wish to make a comment? John?
Just similarly as I explained, this is the second half of the requested amendments. Also, several workshops held on this particular ordinance. The substantive, the substantive pieces or factors of this particular amendment
It does increase the opportunity for public engagement, which was a priority that the community was requesting, and so we've inserted both opportunities for community workshops and conceptual review for the Planning Commission, as well as it provides some stipulations around analysis and review. So particularly around stormwater, we added that designation in, and when we look at the approval criteria, there were several approval criteria added for council to consider in approving a plan development amendment or rezoning. Are there any, I didn't want to go through all the plethora of text amendment changes. One thing that I did want to highlight, based on, I'm not sure if you guys had a copy of the suggestions made by Mr. Wilson on section I'm sorry, that would have been on 79. Actually, you have copies of it.
22-1.
Oh, no, it's maybe 12-159 now.
Okay.
So if you think about what Mr. Capelli said, and Andy, I would never put words in your mouth, so I'm not trying to do that. But if basically what Mr. Capelli said was maybe resequence that one section and either define the word communities as to be a more all-inclusive definition as opposed to just town of Kiawah. Is that really is a summary of your points?
It's not so much defining the word, it's defining what the, whatever you want to call it, whatever that process is, and who's responsible.
Yeah, but if we can define community, then that somewhat defines the community workshop. But that's really the gist of what you were saying. So, you know, to me, those are really the, because nobody else had much to say about it, those are the two issues I think we need to think about.
So, Andy, you were comfortable with, and John, and I'll ask our attorney as well, he's suggesting neighbors and interested parties is how you would define who the workshop is for, Andy?
Would those interested parties be not members or residents of the town? Would that?
No, it would be neighbors and other interested parties. It could be, if the annexation is from off island,
Mhm.
Sure.
it could be someone from that area.
Okay, but just for the hypothetical, once again, it's Haulover Creek wants to, annex where they were next to Freshfields. Somebody who lives on the other side of the high school, are they an interested party?
No.
Okay, so they would have no standing to speak?
How about somebody in Seabrook?
Well, if they want, they can't speak, if they want to talk about the traffic or something, anyone, it's a public.
It's a
meeting.
it's a public hearing, so anybody would be able to
Well,
just.
again, you have
But,
public hearings both at council and the town, but not in the community. So you still have the two public hearings with the planning commission and the town council.
No, I don't think
So-
you still need a workshop that allows anybody that has an opinion as it relates to that to speak.
Or,
Yeah.
Mr., I think I understand what Andy's trying, what he's referring to. Can, instead of maybe trying to solve it here, can staff take a stab at it so that we come back?
Yeah.
And we can talk with Andy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can talk with
He's
him.
he's
The
trying to get
intent-
over the
Separate.
issue of what's a community. And we
Yeah,
have
the
that
intent is to
problem.
be inclusive.
That's
I
the
think,
problem.
yeah.
Nobody knows what it is.
Yeah.
So I think to maybe more clearly define that would almost by default define what the workshop becomes, and then the sequence of those activities. And I think what Andy's looking for is to make sure you don't get the cart before the horse and get
Right.
things in the proper sequence.
It's more like the stop-ins that the county's running with the roads,
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
is what I see it as.
So maybe we should.
We'll work, John and yourself, if you like, can work with Andy to get the language,
it's a good idea.
because we're not gonna be
That's
able to get it right.
We won't get it right today.
That's true.
And we could have council
Yeah.
review that.
Yes.
Is that okay, Andy?
Well, I'd like for us to proceed with the first reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. 'cause we
Okay,
do that.
then this way
Yeah.
it gives you another
Right.
month to get
That's-
this language
Right.
squared around, but.
Yeah, that's
right.
yeah.
Okay.
See.
I think that,
Could I have a motion to come out of public hearing?
Yeah.
Yes.
So moved. Second.
Okay. Could I have a motion to approve the first reading for section 12-159?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, John. Old business, to consider approval of ordinance 2022-01, ordinance of the town council of the town of Kiawah Island. Repealing section 15306 noise of the town island municipal code and adding chapter 8 noise. Is that the way this is?
Yeah, where's the second
We're
reading?
repealing the, yes,
The old one, yes, this is correct.
Yes.
Second reading.
okay, all right.
Second reading of the noise
Second
noise
reading.
ordinance.
Could I have a motion to approve the second reading?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion, any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes. Good job.
New business, to consider approval of the fiscal year 2022-23 Satax funding amounts. This has gone from the Satax Committee, Ways and Means, last month. So this is really a recommendation from the Ways and Means Committee. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Well, I wasn't at Ways and Means, but I'll second it anyway.
Okay, discussion.
So at the Ways and Means, we said that hopefully by today, we would have a better understanding of what this percentage of the dollars would be related to tourism. Do we know that?
We're,
Mr. Rhoda here, she can present on this, she's been looking.
I don't think we're,
So I don't have that information yet. I did reach out to all the management companies to get the data, the occupancy rates, but I only heard from 2. I sent a second request, so I don't have the data. However, I talked to Mr. Prickett, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna schedule a meeting with the State Accommodation Tax Committee sometime in either August or September. And the staff will prepare a presentation on that percentage, the tourism to residents, and that way I'll have a couple of months and have some information that will be accurate and reliable.
And so doing that, that'll give us the opportunity to adjust this one that was arbitrarily reduced.
yeah, there'll be, by that time, we'll have a bunch of information, including, for example, a report back from Freshfields on their project that they got started, but we needed a report before we look at that, so we can look at all of this stuff again.
And make changes
But-
where necessary.
Yeah, but this needs to be approved in order for the budget to go forward, is that
Yes.
right?
I understand that.
Okay.
I just don't want it to be approved without the provision that allows us to come back in and adjust these where some of us were not satisfied with the reductions or the rationale of the reductions.
I gotcha. Yes, I think we can do that.
So,
In other words,
So technically, the state accommodation tax, the total amount is in a budget right now, the total. Only partially has been allocated at this point. What's for us important for the budget purposes is the funding for our applicants.
Right.
Because that reduces other sources of funding for those line items. So,
so what we need is a move to approve the Satax report here.
yes,
We have,
yes.
I so move.
yes.
I think we did that.
You already had a motion in a second.
And we had a second. and
We had a
discussing
second.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're
we're having a discussion now.
Right, correct.
Just to state the obvious, and this is the obvious, the 100% of dollars is the cost, hasn't changed. The sources of funding are either the general fund, state tax, local, and or possibly in other situations, other funds. We have to be careful about that 100% of cost.
Right.
I mean,
We do,
I-
but we also have to be careful on which bucket it comes out of, because some of the other buckets can be used for, like, hurricane cleanup. And
I-
you spend it.
I understand that, but I'm just saying, in this particular case, the intent of both state and local is relatively the same. So my point is that one of the highlights that DeRuta had made was to look at the expense base going out 5 years. I think that is just of paramount importance. And, I mean, again, just, you know, so whether it's 700 or 800, and we move 100 to his bucket or that bucket, you know, the buckets change, but the big thing is the fact of that aggregate cost. And, like I said,
Yeah,
just state the obvious. We're going to talk about the budget just a second. Okay. So we had a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Do you have, before you walk back, do you have
Yeah, the
anything to
budget.
add?
The budget's next.
She's got to get her notes.
After I threw a washcloth over the whole budget situation. This is the first reading to consider ordinance 2023 to adopt the fiscal year budget for the town of Kiawah Island. I'm not sure if you have much to add. You gave a very detailed
No,
presentation.
there was no changes since our review at Ways and Means, and we went line by line then. So what the staff is recommending now to approve by first reading, the budget is proposed. So we're proposing the total, the budget of total expenditures of $11,260,000.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on the budget?
Can I just ask a quick question, and I asked this of Dan yesterday,
Sure.
but I'm looking actually now at your projections out.
Yes.
And I see that starting in 26 and 27, we start to run negative budget. We start to run negative balances. And there's two different things that are in there. And one of our two different projections. It looks to me like the difference is you have projected, or you have budgeted for us to bring the police department in-house versus still keeping it as a contract service. Is that what I read is the big difference?
That's correct, and this is just a start with the projections. We talk about it to having like a little work group to get them more realistic and accurate. So that was just a start. It was just the first scenario that we were talking about, possibly bringing or building in-house police department. But like I said, this is work in progress. We just starting on the projections. And just one thing that, you know, our revenues are very, very conservative in the budget and in the projections too.
But still projected in 3 years to start running deficits.
That's correct.
Okay.
With, yes, everything being pretty much the same as it is, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the mayor raises a good point, which you're hitting on as well. These are unusual years right now where we have revenues that no one anticipated, all for the positive, and that's good. We can build up some fund balances and so on. However, if we're not careful of our fixed cost base going forward, we're going to face a problem that we can't resolve.
Right.
Now is the time to work on that, and that's what we're going to do. Look at projections, get some baselines, make sure we're good, and make sure we don't plan
Yes.
to run a deficit.
Yes.
And of course, John makes a very good point about fund balances, you know, so we have to be cognizant of the residual that goes into a fund balance, you know, in terms of excesses. So if we move things around and deplete them, it's not going to be there, so. Okay, so we have a motion and second to approve this?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Now, Mr. Taylor. Okay, John. Just preparatory to this. All the work that John and Stephanie have done came through, and Chris, sorry, last week or so. as we were putting it all together. So we knew what we wanted to send out. We had a pretty good idea of what we wanted to send out to the community, and as I said earlier, that's done. But this is for you, this is for the council, because we really haven't had this type of a presentation where you had a chance to see this historical context of this thing called dwelling unit and this 1184, this cap that we've heard so much about, and now we're beginning to understand, you know, its genesis, where it came from. So I appreciate, you know, John taking his time to, even then, after all of the work that he did, to go ahead and put this presentation together. So I think you will find it of interest, so.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience. This has been some time putting this together, but I hope that it's beneficial in giving us a reality check of where we are as far as this cap is concerned and moving forward based on the 2013 development agreement. What I want to do first is just kind of walk through a timeline of sort of the development agreement and in its inception. Many of you in the room probably are familiar with sort of the history of Kiawah, but I just wanted to present just some few key dates. And so when we think about Kiawah Island in itself being under unincorporated Charleston County, this predates 1974. This area was zoned agriculture general and agricultural conservation. And under that would have essentially granted approximately 12,000 dwelling units for Kiawah. In 1975 is when a planned development district was formed, and that was presented at Charleston County approval. And that essentially reduced the amount of dwelling unit entitlements to approximately 7,000 or so. In 1988, the incorporation of town was formed in between that. And so when we reached to the first development agreement that the town entered in 1994, that is essentially what established what we're referring to as the first cap. And so I'll walk through exactly what that cap means in a little bit, in a few short minutes. But 1994 was the first development agreement, and that's with the master developer. And that essentially outlined, based upon all the property holdings of, at that time, what could be developed. Fast forward, a new development agreement was entered in 2005. And so that two primary things happened at that time of the 2005 development agreement. The second edition of the cap became effective, and that's where we are today, this 1,184 number. That became effective. But also the other sort of major thing that came out of the 2005 development agreement was the elimination of 325 hotel rooms permitted for parcel 13 and 12A. And that was essentially replaced by the addition of 50 single-family residential lots on Captain Sam's. I want to also note that this is only one development agreement that the town is a party to. Many of you all know that we are a party to a second development agreement with the Kiawah Island Golf Resort, and that was executed in 2010. And so if we fast forward just a few more years, our current development agreement, which is highlighted sort of in this light shade blue color, the 2013, that's our current development agreement, and that's with the successors of the original 1994 development agreement, today known as Kiawah Partners. And essentially all of the portfolio, the holdings of that entity is what guides where we are today with the development agreement. The two things to sort of note from the 2013 development agreement was the addition of Cacique and the addition of Freshfields Village. And so these two major sort of moments in time, 2005 and 2013, is really what the discussion of this 1184 cap number centers around. And just on the right-hand side, you'll see just some recent amendments. I just listed these out just because since 2013, we've had 3 amendments. One was just the extension. There's some language in the development agreement that allows the agreement to be extended based on the amount of acres that the property owner has. And so that was extended. And so the life of this current development agreement is till January 1st, 2026. And then recently in 2019 and 2020, amendments were made specifically to parcel 13, One was for the Cape site, and one was essentially for Lot 1, respectively. I won't go into the details of what those were, but they centered around parcel 13. Just to also recap what this 1184 number kind of centers around, I do want to just provide some clarity around what lands we're talking about. This is not necessarily all of the properties that this 1184 applies to. This only applies to the lands that are the undeveloped lands that the developer owns. And so this is a shaded map that kind of shows you those areas of real property at the 2005 development agreement, essentially the lands that are considered eligible towards the cap. And if I move one slide forward, that shows you what that looks like in 2013. And so you see the difference really between the two. On the first one, you see Cacique and Freshfield is not necessarily on that list, but they've been shaded now in 2013 to show the addition of those parcels as undeveloped lands. So we get to this number of 1,184, and what does that mean? In the development agreement, it identifies a cap on the total number of new dwelling units. And that new dwelling units, that's equivalent to essentially two things, either single-family residential lots or multifamily units. And so to simplify that, I want you to just think about front doors. How many new front doors that could be eligible for development? So whether you're in a single-family home on Governor's Drive, or you live in a multi-unit building as the Timbers. Timbers has 3 buildings on their site. Each of those buildings have 7 units. So that's 7 dwelling units compared to 1 single-family lot on Governor's. And so that's sort of what the dwelling unit is. When we're assessing properties that or dwelling units that goes towards this 1,184, these are all of the properties that have been platted or developed. So at preliminary stage, preliminary subdivision approval. So for example, and you'll see when I go further along, the most recent example I'll give is Captain Sam's. Captain Sam's is undeveloped, but it's been preliminary approved at the subdivision level. So that's counted towards this cap of it being actually platted and developed. When I say developed, it means platted. So in the assessment that was released to the community, we highlighted some revisions in the most recent edition that was released on yesterday. And so I do want to walk through those changes to give you a snapshot of what those changes were from the previous exhibit that was released. There's essentially four sort of changes, and the first is around Ocean Park. Of the current 198 lots at Ocean Park, 11 of those were actually developed prior to 2005. And the 2005 date is the execution of the 2005 development agreement, which is at October 12, 2005. And so that leaves a balance of 187 that actually would go towards that 1,184 cap number. Originally, we had included all 198 in that total. So essentially, we removed 11 lots remove 11 that counted towards the cap. Oyster Rake in itself, again, were counted towards that cap. 23 of those dwelling units does not count towards cap as they were developed prior to the 2005 date. The 2 additions of Freshfields and Cacique, and this is just a recent amendment based on permitting engagement with the developers of the Seafields development, going from 114 dwelling units to 106 dwelling units. And that was just essentially some combination of room sizes that reduced the total number of units there. So the balance of the amount of entitlements for Freshfields varied by just those 8 units that were shifted. When it comes to Cacique, out of the current 244 platted lots, these are the total lots in Cacique. 98 of those were approved prior to 2005, and so the balance of that 146 is what's being counted towards a cap. There is one area that could be eligible for development within Cacique, which is being titled as Burn North, and that's adjacent to Old Cedar. and that has entitlements of approximately 10 dwelling units. The other two that I want to highlight there, as noted, Captain Sam's has preliminary plat approval, and originally this was counted as sort of an additional remaining entitlement. In fact, we just shifted it one column over to the being counted towards the cap as it being developed after the 2005. So it's still undeveloped, but it's just shifted from a different column. And then the final one there, parcel 12, Beachwalker. Staff has spent a lot of time looking at these numbers, and so this was one of the things that just kind of came up at the last session of review, and knowing that the entitlements listed at Beachwalker Park still remain, although this is the site of the county park. There is a 99-year lease with the county and the developer, and that's between those two parties. But those are entitlements, 104 dwelling units still remain. So we felt the need to just have a consistent in how we treated every other remaining entitlements to place that 104 dwelling units under the remaining entitlements. So this is sort of what I call my summary slide here, where it shows where we are today, what the projection would be as it pertains to the 1,184 cap. So today, approximately 786, that's 66% of the cap of lots that have been developed after 2005, the development agreement of 2005. If we look at the total remaining entitlements of properties, that's approximately 382. And that total comes from all of the additional entitlements from those listed: Cacique, Freshfields Village, Parcel 13, and the upper Beachwalker parcels, the upper Beachwalker quilted parcels. And so those total 382. And so if you were to aggregate 382 and 786, that will be essentially all of the lots and entitlements total, which would essentially put us just under the cap of 1,184. There are two active developments right now, Parcel 13 and Freshfields Village, and this is the Seafields. So these are the only two active developments that would essentially impact the cap as today. Like we just seen Seafields, that shifted the amount of dwelling units just in a moment's time. Timbers has been completed in 2019, the Cape is under construction, and Lot 1 is undeveloped. And so any of those changes would essentially make some adjustment to the current totals for lots or dwelling units counted towards the cap. That's really the summation of my presentation.
Excuse me, John.
Yep.
Do you mind if I ask a question about Lot 1? Is that across from the Cape?
Correct.
Thank you.
Questions from council?
I have just a point of clarification. I think I understand this, but I want to make sure that I've got it right. These entitlements are site-specific. They're tied to a specific parcel. They're not fungible. You can't transfer them from one piece of property to another piece of property that you might own.
Correct. So if hypothetically, if you turn to your materials and you look at the worksheet, the 100 dwelling units that are allocated for Lot 1, let's say that they didn't want to do those at Lot 1, and they said, well, I want to take 50 of those and move them to make 100 now on Captain Sam's. That would need to be an amendment to the development agreement in order for that to happen.
Right. Yeah.
Two comments. In the narrative that was part of the dissemination of information yesterday, the actual, it was in quotes, the actual language relative to what constitutes platted in the subdivision that was signed in 2005 and 2013 are both, it's embedded in that narrative. So I think people may want to read over that, but it's very explicit, number one. Number two, it is a 99-year lease, but it's predicated on 5-year renewals.
Right.
And so again, just to state that, it isn't like,
Automatic.
yeah, it's just not a 99-year lease like that there's a beginning and an end. There's 5-year
5
renewals.
years.
You mean like Hong Kong? Oh wait, that didn't work. Yeah.
So I just can't thank John and Stephanie enough. This has been a real labor, and thank God we have them, and now we have it, and it's memorialized for this council, and it's memorialized for future councils. I mean, it's till 2026, and there's projects remaining, and there will be questions remaining, but I think at least now there is a foundation, there is a baseline. It's well documented, and it is there, so. Unless there's any other questions, and then, as I said, in the correspondence that Chris had sent out, if there's questions from the community, please send them in, and we'll get answers for them. Okay.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Thank you very much.
Item D, tab 9, to consider approval of a planning commission member appointment. John, you want to just take a moment and talk about?
Sure. Dr. Heidesfelder is being recommended for the one vacancy. We do have one planning commission member who's left us, be moving off island. And Mr. Britt Stinson, who has served diligently. Dr. Heisenfelder has recently just served on the work committee for the noise ordinance. And so he comes recommended for approval to council. Okay.
Thanks, John. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Item E, tab 10, approval of amendment for the existing arts and cultural events charter. I think this is pretty straightforward. It's just the one highlighted area to include our arts and cultural events coordinator.
And then on the other.
And then
page-
on the other page, there's more. But I think that's language that is comforting to the Arts Council themselves.
Correct.
So unless there's any questions of Stephanie or Ruthie, could I have a motion to approve?
I so move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 11 is the Arts Council Board Charter, and that's to include the communications manager and the arts and cultural events coordinator.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Town administrators report?
Only thing I would like to report on is that the solar rail project, I believe that went out yesterday. So that bid went out. So the only potential, we're moving forward with the bidding process, but the equipment that Carolina Waste will need to service that area once it's completed. Right now, they're expecting us a lag time of maybe this fall. So the location will be completed, and we'll use the same equipment until Carolina Waste can get, is it truck or is it? The compactor units, which is through, is it August?
August is
Yeah.
when they're anticipating to have that equipment. And we didn't know that there was gonna be a lead time on that equipment until the conversations with Carolina Waste yesterday. I was letting them know we were putting the RFP out for bid, and then they told us, that there's gonna be a lead time. So
Brian, when we have a larger footprint and a larger pads, can we just, even if it's just,
Temporary, add a temporary.
yeah, just something to be able to put stuff in, even if it's not a compactor? Well, anyways, if you could think about that, I mean,
Well, so, yeah, we'll use the existing equipment that we have there right now, until we get the new stuff in, but if there's room that permits us to
Okay.
squeeze another unit in there, we can certainly do that.
okay.
And that's all I have now, unless there's questions specifically for me.
Council members, any committee updates? John?
So just a couple of public works things. The work out here on the garage and the other work is finished. You get a chance to go look at it, do so. And the second is the paving on the Beach Walker bike path has been completed. And if you've not ridden down there, it deserves a trip. It's very nice compared to what had been there. A little bit of landscaping left to do, but the path itself looks really nice.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Mary Ann?
No, Mayor.
Dan?
Nothing.
Scott?
I'd like to acknowledge that Wendy Kulik is in the house.
No.
Do you have a guest pass? Oh, we're outside the gates.
That's right, but we do have a guest.
It's nice to see you.
Thank you, Scott.
I didn't know why you don't have a yellow pad and you have a white pad. You're writing on a white pad of paper, not a yellow pad of paper.
Yeah, I didn't bring a pad. I'm on vacation.
Oh,
The material.
any general comments? Anybody? Dan, Scott, Mary Ann, John? Citizen comments? Any citizen comments? Motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
We're adjourned. And thank you all.
And we're going to reconvene.
I think we made it.
Take a minute.
I think we made it.
1 minute.
Don't you have to leave at 3:30 today?